Hi, and welcome to Mom Boss Chronicles. We are your host. I am Jen.
I'm Sue.
And we are empowering and inspiring people through meaningful conversations. So make sure to like and subscribe to listen to great content weekly. Welcome back, everyone, to Mom Boss Chronicles. Today we have a special guest, Melissa Cassiliano. She is a writer. She's a columnist for Preferred Health magazine. Also recently wrote a children's book, I'm Not Invisible. She's a mom of two, a former educator, and also an advocate for inclusivity. So thank you so much for taking the time and coming on today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you too.
Oh, awesome. I guess if we can just get a little bit of your background and then we'll get into all the amazing things that you're doing. Before you were a teacher, you were telling me how you were a journalist, right?
Yes, so not journalist, but I graduated with a communication degree
Okay.
and always had a passion for journalism and wanted to get into it. Ended up graduating and got a project management position for a pharmaceutical company and traveled the world for about a year and a half after college working for this
Amazing.
company.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
In your early 20s?
And early 20s
That's
and
amazing.
went everywhere, saw everything, and always knew that I wanted to work with children. And while I was in college, I kind of built a foundation to go back and get a teaching degree. So did that and started teaching and taught for about 13 years.
Wow.
And
What
yeah,
what um what age level?
I was in mostly it was first grade.
Okay. Oh,
So
that's so
yeah.
fun.
It was great. I loved them. I loved teaching them how to read, and writing was always my favorite.
Oh,
And I couldn't writing was always right after recess, and I couldn't wait to leave recess, which was awful for the kids, and get
Yeah.
back to teach them writing.
oh, you're a true author.
Yes.
That's awesome. And then you had two kids, so were you still teaching while you had your children?
Yes. So a big part when I had my first, she was a 29 week preemie.
Oh,
And
wow.
that kind of changed the course of life a little bit. And that was a huge challenge coming back to work and having this fragile child at home and just navigating that. And it was a little overwhelming a lot of the times. So that's kind of why I stopped teaching, because a few years later, probably like around 8 or 9, I would constantly get phone calls while I'm trying to work and trying to navigate an extensive IEP and trying to help the school learn her. I felt like I was putting in more time for other people's children who I loved, but not enough time for where I needed to be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I totally get it. And I mean, I could imagine as a teacher, there's like a burnout with it.
total burnout.
Yeah.
When you're passionate and you love what you do, which I always did, I put a ton of time into it. And it was a hard time finding the balance between the two. And it was that burnout, and that's when we kind of made the decision to make a huge change, and we left New Jersey
Oh,
6
wow.
years
Yeah.
ago, yeah, and came down to Florida. So somewhere in between that, I did have another child, and he's my almost 11-year-old, and he's my rock.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
I love that.
Yeah,
Yes, you have one of each, which is pretty cool.
yeah, pretty cool.
Oh, and I guess how is it being a mom? You have a teenager and an 11-year-old. Is it like wild to think of all the different stages of
What
being
do,
a
yeah,
mom?
what do we have to look forward to?
Oh, let me tell you, you know, each stage you go through, you learn new lessons, right? And when I look at other parents who have younger kids now, like my advice is, oh, it just gets harder. It gets harder.
Mhm.
And being
Little
a
kids,
mom,
little problems, right? Big kids,
yes,
big problems. Yep.
big problems. And the world doesn't make it any easier
Yeah.
nowadays. So many hard topics that you have to talk about and warn them of. And you don't have that when they're little. And that innocence is something to cherish. And that's what I always try to tell parents as well. And trying to navigate a child now too who is a neurodivergent individual and her special challenges. It's easier when they're little, because now I'm getting into a transition of guardianship, and that is a whole
Um,
nother, yeah, that's a huge transition and something else that we need to learn, and that's been a bit of a challenge and just a lot that comes with it. So it gets harder, but you learn how to navigate it. And I always say, as a mom, you find your tribe in every different area and all those things. When you have that tribe, it makes life a little easier as well.
oh my
So
God, I can only imagine, especially when you're a mom who does have a child, like you were saying, neurodivergent, like you want to be around other moms who understand, I'm sure, the things that you're going through
Yeah.
and validate
yeah.
it.
How did you
Right.
meet your support system?
It's through one lifelong, right? You have your
Yeah.
lifelong friends who really understand. And then you also just meet along the way. So,
Yep.
like parents at the school or parents at different activities that you do, and they understand it. And we talked about, I write for a column, Preferred Health Magazine. And one of my columns I wrote is how to be a friend to a parent who has a neurodivergent child, because we're not easy friends. Like I'll fall off the map a lot of times, and I need those friends who understand, okay, she's going through something right now, she'll
Yeah.
be back,
Right.
or how to help me navigate those scenarios as well, because sometimes they just don't, you meet people along the way who don't have that understanding,
Yeah.
and you come across looking maybe rude or
Right.
not
Yes.
approachable, and
Yep.
that's not what I'm
Yeah.
going for. It's just
Yeah,
you're
you
going
want
through
friends.
something.
You still
Yeah.
need friends, but
Right.
you need friends who understand.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
sometimes I need space, or I want to be invited or included. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that you do that because I think from your perspective, you're sharing
Yeah.
what the reality is, and then for us folks who may not understand from our perspective, then it's like, okay, like then maybe you feel more comfortable opening up dialogue or asking questions and to understand better. So I appreciate that, hearing that you do that.
Yeah, and then I put in the article too, just how to really approach a parent as well. Like you said, like
Yeah.
questions that you should ask and questions that you should not ask,
Yep.
Yeah.
that come across like as, and you don't mean it, but they come across to the other parent as like ignorant at sometimes
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
And that's like a hard balance. And you learn that people don't mean it. You just don't know.
Yeah.
And so in writing the article, it was meant to help everybody.
That's
So
an
I love
awesome
that.
dialogue to have.
Mhm.
yeah.
Because as parents, we meet all different types of other children and other different types of
Mhm.
parents. So it's pretty interesting to be aware of that.
And that brings me into my book, because as parents, there's also the child that's then involved. So when I wrote the book, I'm Not Invisible, I wrote it during COVID, and I wrote it based off some of the experiences that I have with my daughter, and also what I've seen as an educator in the classroom. And it's all about teaching inclusivity through actions, and those actions that we can teach others, and we can show those children how to include our children. So
Mhm.
there'll be times that my daughter has a huge voice, but she gets out into the world, she can't use it.
Yeah.
So just teaching, the neighborhood children or the children in the classroom, how can you really get them involved? And it's also educating parents as well, because we send our kids into the world and we say, hey, we know that so and so, has challenges or their brain works different. Just be kind. But what
Mhm.
does that mean to be kind? Say hi to them? That's not going to help. That's not going to really be inclusive. It's not going to really include somebody. So that was the whole mission of creating I'm Not Invisible, is teaching inclusivity through actions, not just our words.
And it's so true
So
because we do tell our children, be nice, but then what?
right,
How
then
do
what?
you be a friend to
Yeah.
somebody
Right.
who's not exactly like you?
Right.
Yeah.
And an
Yeah.
advocate, I guess, too, an ally,
Mhm.
what does it mean to perhaps stick up for
Yeah.
this person if they're being ridiculed or bullied? And, it's such
Yeah.
like you mentioned early on, it's a complex world, our
Yeah.
children live in, especially with social media
Mhm.
and media
Yeah.
and et cetera. So I just love that.
Yeah, so I'm Not Invisible, it's about a little girl who feels not seen?
Yeah, so she is a little girl, Franny, who goes into the world, and she's in her neighborhood, and she has a big voice, and she just wants everyone to play with her. She just wants to be seen. But when she gets into the world, she freezes. She doesn't get out the words that she really wants. So she feels invisible, and she goes through different scenarios in the neighborhood throughout the book. But through it, she learns that it's not just her who is faced with challenges. The other characters, who are our neurotypical children in the book, also are faced with their own challenges as well. So it was really important to me when creating the book to show that everybody goes through their own issues in life, right? And everybody at one point feels invisible. I didn't want to, we call it pigeonhole, like just one area, one diagnosis, one syndrome. I wanted
Like a
it to
label.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, because you know what? Technically, my daughter is not currently labeled,
Mm.
and she has everything that falls under a label and a diagnosis, but she never needed it because I was such a strong advocate for her. She has her IEP. She was getting all the services, and when we left New Jersey, we left CHOP, and our doctor at the time said, "Hey, I can give you this label, but she wouldn't get anything more than she already has." So we left thinking, okay, that's okay. But now,
Mhm.
as we approach those later years and we are working on guardianship as of 18, it kind of is needed, and I see the
Okay.
need for it. But going back to the book, I wanted it to be for everybody. I
Yeah.
wanted anybody to relate to it.
I love
And
that.
and when you read it, even grown-ups can relate. You know, at some point we've all felt invisible, and you
Sure.
know, we just everyone wants to be seen, everybody wants to be heard, and that's the premise. And I really want it to be a series, so I want to
Yeah.
see it keep continuing. And
Okay.
with it, the goal is to get into schools and educate students, teachers, parents, and with it, I created a program called The Power of One,
I love
right? So we talked about teaching our children to be kind, but also teaching them how they can be the one. It doesn't have to be the one for just a neurodivergent individual. It could be for any of their friends. Like be that one friend. If we think about it, we all have our one. And when I created the program and I was excited about it, I started to well up talking to our publisher about it because it made me think, who's my daughter's one, right? Who is that one for her? And, you know, I couldn't pinpoint it. And then she came out and said, "You're the one." And
Oh,
it's so true. And but as a parent, we are that one most of the time. But as the parent, we want another one. We want the friend
Absolutely.
one,
right.
right? And that's the mission, to go out and teach kids what that power of one really does for somebody else. And I've heard some amazing stories from other parents that have told me how somebody has touched their child's life, and it makes a difference on how they grow up. It makes a difference on how they enter the real world
Yeah.
and
And their
the
confidence.
importance. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
know.
the mission.
That's awesome. And
Every
you go to schools like all ages, like elementary, middle, like high school?
So here's the thing. The book is geared towards second to fourth grade.
Mhm.
Okay.
I really feel that I can make it work anywhere. I can make it work for anyone. And I honestly feel when I speak to high school students, they're really intrigued by it.
Mm.
And I met two at a fair the other day, and they sat with me for probably 15, 20 minutes listening to the story, you know, me just retell it to them, me talking about my daughter and how it relates. And they were so intrigued. And I feel like it turned something on for them.
Yeah.
And I feel like those kids, those middle schoolers, those high schoolers, they're the ones who kind of need those reminders.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Our lower grades, which I love, and that is probably where I'll be most. They need, sadly today, to be taught empathy. Empathy is not
Yeah.
innate anymore. Empathy is something that has to be explained and
Yeah.
taught a little bit more. So,
So
so
true.
that's
Yeah.
the
Like,
goal. So
yeah, I don't
I
think
see
other,
myself everywhere.
yeah, I think people have a hard time putting themselves in other people's shoes. And it's so
Mhm.
true. I feel like young kids, it's kind of sad and scary. Like, like when you send your kids to school, it's like, I hope that the other children are kind to them.
Yeah.
I hope that they're
Right.
having a bad day, that somebody's there to be their friend. Like,
We've turned
Mhm.
into a very individualized society
hmm
where
Yes.
we don't typically think about our fellow man and woman and
yeah,
neighbor. You know, we've become
Yes.
very
internal.
totally. And I think
Yeah.
as a result of that, you know, this is over generation, it's generational kind of,
Mhm.
and like parents aren't teaching their kids about empathy, about thinking about the other
These
people,
topics. Yeah.
you know, and so like that's something I with my own son I am like it's not just you. This is
Uh-huh.
not your world, you know.
Yeah.
You live in a world with other people.
Totally. I try to tell
Yes.
my son that too. Like,
Yeah.
we had a situation recently where there was a child who was going through an outburst, and I try to give my son like the backstory of it. It was like, she's
Yeah.
going through something. Her family's getting divorced. She transitioned to a new school. Like, you have to give her grace. I know she was not nice to you, and you're going to remove yourself from that situation, but don't take that personal. Like, you have to understand she's going through a lot.
Right.
And he was like, I
Right.
didn't know that. Like, I didn't think of that. Like, yeah, other people
Right.
have
Yeah,
stuff that they're
it's
dealing
our
with
responsibility as
to explain
parents
that.
to explain that, right? It's
Yeah.
not, yeah.
Exactly. And that is exactly like, it's funny you say that too, because I have a friend who read the book to her 7-year-old, and she wrote me immediately and said, I love that you gave the other characters something that they're going through also, because it showed that, you can think of others. You have to think beyond yourself. And that was the exact message that her child got from it, where you don't have it. They're not taught it, and I can't agree more with that. So that
Yeah.
was an important message as well. Think beyond ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
grown-ups have a hard time with that. That's another thing I
We
address a
have to
lot.
be reminded.
Yes.
We literally, 'cause we'll
Yes.
take offense towards things, and it's
Yeah.
like things aren't always what they seem. Like, you
Right.
have to understand that wasn't personal, or like
Mm-mm.
you were saying, like, if I retreat as a friend, don't think I
Yeah,
don't want to be your friend. It's just give me
right,
a minute and just know that
Yeah.
I still care about you. Yeah.
right, right, and I've lost friends throughout the year throughout the years, because of that,
It's
and,
unfortunate.
the
Yeah.
the lack of understanding,
Yep.
and, that's unfortunate, but, you have to be understanding of things. Even now, there was another column that I wrote. I write about all kinds of different things that come up, and one is, I was never on social media. I was never, one to, put anything out there, and now I'm putting so much out there. And when you first start, you expect, and you probably see this here too and can relate, you expect your expectations of those around you to be your following, to be your support
Mhm.
system.
Yeah.
The
But
people
when
who know,
you
yeah.
go, yeah, but then when you get into it, strangers become your biggest support.
Advocate. Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah.
yeah, and that was something that was learned, and I don't hold it against those who I don't hear. It's some of the closest people to me that, maybe didn't even buy my book yet, or maybe have never picked up my and read a column. But I've learned, that they're going through life too, right? They
Yeah.
have to, they're doing their own thing, and I respect that as well. And, that's not something I ever hold against somebody.
Yeah. And it's vulnerable to put yourself out there.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, because you're like, "Oh, I hope, people are nice," and people on the internet can be kind of mean on social media.
Right.
You have to learn how to, like,
Yeah.
tune that out, but that's
Yeah.
awesome that you put yourself out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going. And, I started with almost Amazon influencing at the time. We talked
That's so
about how,
cool.
how I got my book published was I did a mommy makeover with another, Lauren Venna, who's a makeup artist, and she is
And
published on
also
the same label.
yeah,
And she did a mommy makeover. I went to it and I spoke with her. I told her about my book, and she's like, "Oh, I love it. Send it to me." And she forwarded it to the publisher who, thought that there was a need in the world for it. And that's how it ended up being published. And I'm so thankful for that.
so
Um,
crazy, right? How, like, the universe works.
yes, it's
Yeah.
entirely
It
crazy. And
conspires for you for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Put in the work and everything. Well, so that's interesting. So you had put the book together. Did you get the illustrator too? Like, did that all come together, or because I know, like, I've followed your process.
yes.
My friend Blair is also in the process of making a book too. So how did you kind of, I guess my question really overall is like, how did you sit down and kind of make the framework for it and put it all together? Was the process hard, cathartic?
So So the process for me was the writing process. It was there, right? I had the
Yeah.
need of it. And being an educator, I knew like elements that I wanted it to have, because the goal is I wanted it to be in classrooms. I
Yeah.
want it to be a curriculum. I think it has a strong message, and that's where I think it belongs. So when I was writing it, I knew to include strong vocabulary, literary elements, and just things that we would teach children during the writing process as mentor text. I
Mhm.
added a lot of elements like pop out words, or, just the way the text is structured. So I had all of those elements in my mind, because I knew what good text looked like
Mhm.
as I was teaching. And I knew
Right.
that some of the model texts that I would use. Then the illustrating part was hard because, we live in an AI world. And at first I was like, oh, I want it to look very futuristic. I want it to be very appealing to children. And I kind of went in AI direction at first, but then I realized our older generation, our teachers, our
Yep.
administrators, they're not there yet. So I learned that I needed a nice balance in between those elements. So it took about 8 months for me to approve and find the right illustrator with our
Yeah.
publisher. And that was the longest process out of all of it, was finding the right illustrator.
Yeah.
And, once we did, I couldn't be more,
It felt right.
pleased. It feels so right. Like, that's Franny. Like, Franny is,
Aw.
That's
so
awesome.
relatable and a lovable character, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out.
I can't wait to get the book and
Me
read it
too.
to my kids.
I say
Yeah.
I need to read it to my son.
I feel like that's not a story often that I read in children's books, inclusivity. Like,
Yeah.
we've, read tons of other stories, but there's not a lot about that. So that's so cool that exists.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And
And,
I guess, go ahead.
it starts in a small network. It hasn't been, it's not distributed yet in, the big stores. I wanted it to start in my small network, and the network's been just growing and growing. I've had opportunities to go to the Autism Speaks field day in our area. I've had opportunities to go to our township. So, like, your little circle just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And currently I'm speaking with somebody about translating it into Spanish, because there's such a need in our Spanish community for books to be bilingual, because, they don't have enough resources. So little things keep evolving every day. And with that evolving, I change. And, maybe my website changes, maybe the program I'm doing changes, but that's, what makes it so special and
It's like
such
a
a great
ripple effect.
process.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's one of those things you have to be adaptable with, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Yes. And we talked yesterday. That's the one thing that I think my strength is I am adaptable, right? We can change. And that's another thing we don't see a lot in our world,
Yes.
that you can't
Embracing that.
change.
Right.
Yeah.
Embracing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we talked about it yesterday, like how you went from working in the communications field to being a teacher to moving to, like, now being a writer. It's so cool. And that's all different phases of your life that when it's time to, like, when things don't resonate, it's like, okay, then it's time to move on, and trusting yourself.
Right. And not to be afraid of it. And that's
Yeah.
one thing that, another thing I talk about is getting out of that rut, right? Being able to recognize that it's time for that change. It's time to get out of that box and, find your passion, find what you love. I didn't know I was coming to Florida. I didn't I knew I was coming to Florida. I didn't know I was going to be a writer. I didn't know that was going to happen. I thought I was now a stay-at-home mom, but that's not in my blood. I love what I do. I love being a mom, but what is in my blood is being flexible. That's what I need. I love working. I love, doing what I do, but I have to have the flexibility, because at any moment I'm needed somewhere else. Even yesterday, Jennifer, when you tried to call, I was already at school. I was like, oh, of course, here it is,
Early
picking up a
pickup, right?
child,
Yes.
early pickup.
Yeah.
So that's what I need. And that's the balance I found that I need in my life. I have to have that flexibility to be a mom, take care of a house, be a wife, and, still work and do what I love.
Yeah. You're so,
That's where I'm at.
love that you recognize that about yourself, right? And you're not like, "Oh, I stuck with it because I had to
I'm
trudge
told
through,"
to. Yeah, I'm
like,
told to just be a teacher forever, even if it's not fulfilling. Or
like, life is so beautiful, and when you do go after your passions, the things that make you
doors
happy,
open up.
they really do.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like, we talk about this, we've talked about this for us, for its real estate, like, it allows us the opportunity to hustle and also be available for our children,
and host this podcast.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So all the things. I just love that.
Yeah. So I feel like it's so cool to know that you could be your authentic self and live your authentic life and be fulfilled.
And that's it. And that brings me again to my last column that just got published on April 1st. And that was all about legacy. Like, what are we leaving behind when we're no longer here? And
I love
it's
that. I'll have to read that.
it made me think, because I've lost some people who are so meaningful in my life in recent years, and you don't stop thinking about them. But when I don't stop thinking about them, it's because of the impression and everything that they've left on the people around them. And that's so meaningful. And then it gets you thinking about yourself, like, what am I doing here? Why I'm here? I want it to be meaningful. I want it to be authentic. I want to live a life that, gets looked at when I'm no longer here, like, wow, she truly lived. And
Yeah.
it's the only time I say that you should worry about what other people think of you, right? Because I don't care any other time. But what are you doing that's going to leave that lasting impression? What legacy do you want to be left behind? And that was
And
my
it's like
last
the
one.
generational thing, because you're thinking of like the people before you who passed and the impact they left. But then it's cool because your children are looking up to you and you're leaving a legacy for them. And they'll be like, my mom did this and it went after her dreams and made me feel this way and gave me the confidence. And they'll leave that on to other people they meet. It's like such a beautiful thing to pass on.
Yes. And when you bring that up, there's one thing when I was writing the book, and there's a lot when you've gone through what we've gone through with my daughter as a preemie and just her health issues throughout her life. You don't want to put it all out there sometimes, right? You don't want, that's her life. But then in doing the book, it's not her. That's what I say. It's inspired by the events of her. This is a realistic fiction book. But my goal is, when putting the book out there, is hopefully one day this is her legacy. She can now take the book. She can now go to schools and read the book. Like, I would love nothing more. And that's like a dream and something that I hope for her, to use that voice that she has trouble using. She has it. It's there. She's a talker. But when she gets out into the world, she has to feel comfortable enough. And hopefully one day this becomes something she can do.
She has an amazing warrior mom. Like that is so
Oh,
beautiful. Like, oh, that just gives me
thank
chills.
you.
Yeah. Oh, I
Thank
love
you.
it. And my one question I have for you, if you don't mind answering it, if it's a little hard, I apologize. But can you explain for our audience what the difference is between neurodivergent and neurotypical? Because I know those are buzzwords that come up a lot lately. And for parents and for the children, do you have like a explanation that you can help people understand?
Basically, we don't want to say special needs anymore,
Hmm.
right? Like so neurodivergent is just what we kind of want to say when we're describing, anyone who has a special need, a syndrome, or, if they're autistic, or, just their brains just work differently. That's
Hmm.
it. And a neurotypical child is my son, like he's going through the world with no challenges,
Yeah.
other than his brain is working as a 40-week year, well, I shouldn't even say that, as a typical child, and
Yeah.
I quote, it's hard to explain, but it's the right way to describe our special needs population.
And I like that
Because
better than neurotypical neurodivergent because it's just meaning to me like, okay, their brains just think a little different. Doesn't mean they're different from you. Like it's just a little bit of way they process or think.
exactly. And it's the way that they process or think, but it just we don't want to say disability, right? Because
Mhm.
many of these children, they have amazing abilities. Like
Yeah.
Superpowers,
my daughter
literally.
has so many things. So,
Yes.
a disability sounds so negative, where an
Yes. Like a
ability,
disadvantage, which is
right, a
not.
disadvantage. She's not
No.
disadvantaged. There's so many things that she is able to do, and the whole population is able to do.
Right.
And that's where the inclusivity through actions comes up. They just have to be understood. We have to teach, how can you, a good example, Franny in the book wants to play hide and seek. If the other child just knew that she loved to play, and, oh, you're going to be on my team, and then I know that you would have a good time, like that would have made it a lot easier for Franny in the book, for somebody to understand that about her. And
Mhm.
who is going to tell her that? Franny's not going to tell her that. Maybe it's a dialogue between parents on the block, like they understand how Franny works,
Yep.
and how her
Yeah.
brain works. And that's where the education has to come in. So,
And I feel like it's really good for the parents to understand, like you said, so they can speak to their
Yeah.
children, so they can
yes.
be kinder and, more of a, like
An
a,
ally.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Be
interesting.
not just saying be kind,
Yeah.
what does that
include.
mean?
Yeah.
Include, right? It takes an action, not just a word, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to have an action.
And I know for myself, I'm sure when I think back at school, there are times where I felt lonely, and I think I'm neurotypical. I'm not sure, but like, even as a person, like I feel lonely, so I can only imagine other children who
Yeah.
feel like a little different, like what they must be feeling. So,
There's a woman today telling me her daughter, who is autistic, is being bullied at
oh,
school.
breaks my heart.
First
Yeah.
First grade.
by boys. Yeah, and I think like,
Why?
where does this come from?
I know.
Home.
Home. Yeah. And the lack of education. And here, that's what I say. I could go into schools. I know the kids are going to be so receptive. The
Yeah.
problem is that the education doesn't go outside of those walls at school
Yeah.
now, right?
Follow
Like
up.
it's the parents that we need to educate, because in our world today, 1 in 32 children are autistic. And, our population, as far as special needs, we have so many children who are diagnosed with something in our world
Right.
that we have to really have the understanding, because we spend so much time, and I love this phrase that I've heard, we spend so much time educating our own children how they need to communicate with the world, but the world doesn't spend the time to communicate how they need to include or communicate with our children.
Yep.
And
So
that's
true.
the hard thing. We spend so much of our resources teaching a neurodivergent population, okay, this is what you need to do when you get into the world. But what is the
Yeah.
world doing
To help.
to
Yeah.
help? Because it is, we're all faced with it now. Like it is, such a common thing to know somebody who is
Yeah.
faced, with
And
some type of challenge.
and this is like a big topic. I know we talked about this before, like the way the education system is set up. Like my son is 9, he's really smart, but he has ADHD, so he struggles and I keep getting calls and it breaks my heart. And it's just one of those things where I wish the education would be a little bit more nimble
Yeah.
with his needs, and they're not, and
Yep.
it's just frustrating.
Yeah. It's they expect it's a one size fits all, and it's
Yeah.
not.
That's it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. I actually just
Not.
posted today, there was a little meme about like an elephant, a dog, a monkey, and a bird. And it's like education, right? Okay, now all of you climb that tree.
Right. Right.
Like
Yeah.
that, it's
Yep.
not a one size fits all. Like that's
Yeah.
not going to work. And that's it. I talk about, like, I feel like I'm such a passionate person, and I recognize things and I want change, and it's my passion to go out and try to change things. And that's the one thing, our education system is pretty archaic,
Mhm.
and it needs to change with today's children. And I hope that we do see that change. I know my last year of teaching, I'm sitting there reading a book, and you have your carpet and everyone's sitting there, and I had a child who just couldn't sit there, and I look over, his head is in the cubby, and like he just has to spin. He just, his
Yeah.
head is now in the cubby.
Yeah.
And I stopped for a second and I paused and I said, this is not working. Like this
Yeah.
is not today's world anymore
Yeah.
for our children. Like they are on the go, and we need to recognize that. And it's no fault of the teachers. They're trying their best, but
Yeah.
you have to have that understanding that some of these kids can't sit. Some of these kids are wired where
Yeah.
they're constantly moving.
Mhm.
Information is given on a whim at any time, and that's
Yep.
what they're used to. It's not what our system is used to.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I follow a lot of articles on how that needs to change. And, I hope we see it.
I know. I
I
hope we
want
catch
nothing.
up with it.
Yeah, I know, even for my son, like I always say, I just want him to be educated. Like I don't want him to be taught to a test anymore. So we're
Right.
Oh my
constantly
God. Yeah.
looking.
Yes.
Yeah. So and that's not education.
Nope.
It's not how and that this is, I'm so passionate about this for so many reasons, but it's I sat in on a curriculum night. This is a good example of all of this. And the teacher was like, "Oh, we have a new writing program." And here I am, a writer. I'm all excited. I'm like, "Oh, this is great. We have a new writing program." She goes, "It's exactly what they'll see on the state test." I was
Oh,
like, "Oh,
We're not teaching critical thinking
I
skills,
know.
or like
yeah,
passion,
Yeah, like
like just
teaching towards
imagination."
passion. It's just
yeah,
this result.
scantrons.
We just go to this result and that's it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and then we
And
wonder
right,
why we
there's
don't have empathy or like compassion.
right, imagination,
Yeah.
like, I can't wait, go in. Like, I just want to teach children, like, you can think of anything and make it a story. You can be a writer. Like, that's all kind of, getting lost in our data, our test scores, and,
Yeah.
Dehumanizing our children in a way where, like, I'm guilty of it. Like, there'd be times that there's so many expectations of me as a teacher. And I recognized it and I couldn't do it anymore, because
Yep.
they'd come in and I wouldn't say, "How was your weekend?" Or, what, "Oh, you got a dog this weekend?" Like you forget to humanize
I
these
know.
small
Yep.
little kids. And that's not how I want it to live. That's not how I want it to teach
Right.
anymore. And, that's, a big part of probably why I don't look to go back even where I am.
I feel like that's a common
Because
theme
of the
that I've heard
system.
from other friends who have exited the education. Yeah, that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
There's that the love, the
Yeah.
passion has been stripped because it's all about, and I don't understand the standardized testing and where that came from,
Or why that's
it
important, because
exists,
they say that like our reading levels are down and math levels are down. So why we keep doing it? If that's not
it's
working,
not working.
then why are we
Right.
keep going? I
I don't know.
yeah.
Right. And but then you're called as the parent, oh, he's doing, he's
Mhm.
not performing well. And
Right.
and let me tell you, so the other spectrum of this is when I get handed for my daughter, when they try to show me their standardized testing on her, that's a whole nother system that just doesn't that is so broken. Like they shouldn't even be testing our ESC
Yeah.
I
population
know.
most of the time. Like again,
Why?
it's the elephant, the dog, and the bird. Like
Right.
it doesn't fit. So
Yeah.
one thing that I'm passionate about here is finding my son going forward in middle school or high school that takes out the standardized testing
Oh, I
and just
love that.
educates and just gives him the knowledge of learning. And that's something that, again, another passion that I look to always be
I
a
love
part of.
that. I feel like it starts with one, right? Like you have to like be the voice, and if
Yeah.
we all like kind of stand up to it, maybe we can make that change. Like that's
Right.
amazing.
Well, and I think in New Jersey, I was able to pull my daughter out of testing, and that I was fine doing. Like I didn't
Mhm.
want her to test. I know Florida here gives me no option. She has to take,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, which I don't like. So I don't know if that's still the same in New Jersey, but
I wonder.
that's one thing. As parents, if we all take away, hey, guess what? You know what?
Right.
I don't want my child. But then all the curriculum that they're teaching our children
It's for
are
that.
leading up
Just
to
for
a
that.
to a
Yeah.
Weird.
test.
That's
Right.
weird.
Yeah.
I just so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
but
know.
we could talk about this forever. I
Yeah.
I know.
appreciate the work you're doing. It's
Seriously.
amazing.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
impressive. Like, bow down.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And if
Thank
anybody
you.
wants to buy a copy of your book, where's the best place they can get this book?
Well, right now it is at melissacass.com. And pretty soon, the end of May, will be where all books are sold online.
Yay. I'm
Awesome.
gonna get my
So,
copy
Yeah,
today. Looks awesome.
absolutely. And we'll provide a link for that for everybody as well. And
And you're on social media too, right? So people can find you if they want to see like more of your writing or what you're up to.
yes, it's the Melissa Cass at on Instagram. So I can
Perfect.
provide that link as well.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link it up together.
yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Melissa.
much.
I
Thank
hope
you for having me. This is
Yeah.
lovely.
absolutely. I hope this inspires other parents, and inspires the world. So
Yes.
we appreciate it and we hope you have a great day in Florida.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. Make sure to like and subscribe to listen to more great content.